interviews. In August 2001, actor James Woods was on a flight from Boston to Los Angeles when he observed some Middle Eastern passengers acting strangely. He told authorities what he saw, and the FBI has apparently corroborated that it may have been a dry run for the 9/11 hijackers.
I was on a flight. Without going into the details of what made me suspicious of these four men, although it would have been blatantly obvious to the most casual observer, I took it upon myself to go to the flight attendant and ask to speak to the pilot of the plane. The first officer came out. I reported to him that I felt that the four men, and I said, can you look over my shoulder and see who I'm talking about? And he said, yeah. I said, I think they're going to hijack this plane. I mean, everything they're doing, and I explained to him these details, which I've been asked to keep private until whatever jurisdiction, whatever trials may take place. Their behavior was such that that I felt they were going to hijack the plane. I also said I'm very much aware of how serious it is to say on an American aircraft in flight the word hijack. So yeah. I'm saying this because I really have reason to believe it's true. As I found out later that not only did he make a report, but the flight attendant also made a report of my suspicions to the FAA. When I got home that night, it had been a very turbulent flight. I had said to this woman I'm dating and my girlfriend and my best friend, they said, how was the flight? And I said, well, aside from the terrorists and the turbulence, it was fine, which was now in retrospect not such a very funny joke, but it was August 1st and nobody was thinking along those lines. And when 9/11 happened, we were all stunned, and we all happened to be at my house that evening, and my friend Scott said to me, remember that flight you took in August? I said, yeah, I've been thinking about it all day. He said, well, maybe you should call the FBI. And I said, I'm sure they're being inundated, but I thought it over and I called the local office, and within 2 minutes got a hold of a very intelligent young man, a special agent there, who took the report. And I said, I hope I'm not wasting your time. He said, well, we have so many reports coming in. And he said, and by the way, even if this leads to something, we don't like to backwash information to people because in case they have to go to a trial and be witnesses or whatever, so you won't hear from us. I said, well, great. And he said, but we appreciate your calling. 6:45 the next morning, I get a phone call that actually wakes me up, and he said, we want to talk to you about the flight that you took in August. I said, oh, did the manifest match of any of the flights yesterday and my flight? He said, well, we can't tell you that. I said, well, look, I'll get ready and I'll come down to the federal building. He said, we're outside your house. We'll just wait for you.
Wow, 7:15. So this is
6:45 in the morning. I said, and this is the only funny part of any of this, I said, how did you know where I lived? And there was a pause. He said, we're the FBI. We're the FBI, thank you. So they came in, and I said, look, I'm dying to know, were these the guys? And he said, well, we've had 36,000 tips in one day, and there's two of us, and we're going to be at your house all this morning, so you can do the math, but we can't tell you, So since then, I have identified for sure two of them as two of the terrorists.
Really?
Who actually were not on Flight 11, but one was on Flight 175 and one was on Flight 77. And I've been told unofficially, not by the FBI, but by someone else in actually a higher level of government, believe it or not, just through a coincidence, through a mutual friend, that all four of them were terrorists involved.
That is unbelievable. So there was basically a rehearsal what these guys were doing.
Right, but what's significant about this is that it was a rehearsal with four men, and I can't say it as a fact that they were the four, but I've been led to believe, without going into details of how, that they were on different flights. So the notion that they were separate cells, and this is tricky territory, but I think in the Moussaoui trial there's going to be some contention that, he was a soldier and didn't know what was going to happen until he stepped on the plane and then decided in a fit of good conscience not to be a terrorist anymore. In fact, the fact that these two people were identified by myself and other people and were on the Boston-LA flight and ended up dying on two other flights of the four flights on September 11th shows that they were.
What an amazing story.
There was cross-collateralization.
And this is the first time I've ever heard this. This is the first time you're telling the story.
Yes.
So it was just you and these four guys in first class, nobody else?
No, there were a couple
other guys?
Yes.
Were they nervous too, or was it just you picking these guys out?
As I explained to the FBI, they said, what was your first instinct? And aside from certain things like four guys getting on a transcontinental flight without any hand luggage, it's funny, I notice behavior because I guess I'm an actor, and it's kind of what I do for a living.
You always watch people, right?
I just kind of observe people. It's something I've always been fascinated by. Sort of like that scene in Annie Hall where Woody Allen and Diane Keaton sit and watch people and sort of talk about who they might be. And there were four guys. When the flight attendant, who was a woman, came up to them, they literally ignored her like she didn't exist, which is sort of a kind of Taliban, kind of a Taliban, idea of womanhood as a, not even a human being. I mean, it seems their disrespect for women is so extraordinary. And they didn't order alcohol, and they said to me, what did you think these guys were? I said, well, I thought they were either four law enforcement officers or four terrorists, in that they had that thing that guys who are undercover or on a mission have between each other, and it's impossible to explain.
Well, you were lucky.
Well,
you're absolutely lucky that they didn't decide to do it a month before.
By the way, one thing I must clear up that,
Sure.
that has been sort of misreported in the press. I did not report this to the FBI before September 11th.
Right, just the FAA.
And it was only done by, as I understand it, the flight crew, as I've been told later. And, you know, there are people who love to take pot shots. I can't tell you.
Why? I mean, I think you did the right thing.
Well, no, but they'll say, oh, you told the FBI and they didn't do anything. That's completely and utterly
don't worry
wrong.
about those pinheads.
No, but,
I mean, you did exactly the right thing.
No, but I mean, you know, if you worked with these people, as I have, they are incredibly dedicated people. And it's just something I want to go on record as saying.
Good.
I've had nothing but great experience with them.
In some of your interviews, you have been very hawkish against the terrorists. I mean, probably the most outspoken Hollywood guy. And you used the word towel heads one time. Did you take a lot of heat on that?
Maybe, but I don't pay attention to heat. I mean, I don't explain and I don't complain and I don't.
But to say that in a pejorative way, would you have taken that back?
Well, I do think at times when you feel passionate about something, there are times that all of us, I'm sure you have, and I know I have allowed my tongue to sort of get out ahead of my brain a little bit. And by the way, clearly I would not want to hurt anybody's feelings. But on the other hand, it's not like after thousands of incidents of terrorism in the past 20 or 30 years that, you know, we have to worry a lot about like Swedish terrorists. Okay?
That's right.
I mean, so the bottom line is, you know, I think of the energy that a lot of people in the Muslim world, and there are, I'm sure, excellent, extraordinary people in that world, if they put that energy into policing their own, as much as they are criticizing politically correct or incorrect gaffes like I made, that maybe would be all a lot better off in the world. I mean, it reminds me of those people who lived in Dachau who, you know, were shocked at the end of the war to find out that there was, you know, what that black smoke was coming from those chimneys 100 yards from their house. You know. They
don't want to know the truth. Mr. Woods, we appreciate you coming in. That is really some story, though, about the people, the hijackers on the plane.
That interview with James Woods took place just a few months after the 9/11 attacks. And directly ahead